Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I have for you guys a semester wrap-up. And so what this video is going to be the, how many were there? 9 books I read for my English literature classes as a second semester sophomore. So this is what I've been busy doing. This is why I haven't posted or been active like at all in the past 4 months. So I have some goodies, I have some not so goodies, and we're just gonna get started, okay? So the first class we're going to address was a 19th century British lit class, and the professor who taught this class made it a Dickens class because he's a Dickens scholar. And so I read some Charles Dickens. Prior to this class, I had only read A Tale of Two Cities a couple of years ago for fun, and I didn't really enjoy it. So we'll see if my opinion has changed. First book we read was A Christmas Carol. Did I talk about this in a wrap-up? I can't remember when I stopped doing like the recent reads, so I might have. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I had never seen the movie. I had never seen or like read the book. It just wasn't part of my Christmas tradition. But I'm really glad we started out with this book. It was nice and short, and it really gets you in the mood and mindset of Dickens. It just, I think, epitomizes what he can do with characters, because Scrooge is like one of the most iconic and reproduced and referenced character, I think, of any work ever. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it, which was shocking. Next book I read for this class was David Copperfield. I love this book. Listen, it should probably be more than a 4 out of 5. It should probably be a 4.5. I had such an emotional attachment. I cried numerous times, especially at the end. We read this over like 6 or 7 weeks, so I spent a lot of time with these characters, and it is a hefty book. This doesn't look like it. This is 850 pages. I really enjoyed it, and after writing 3 whole essays on it, my love and appreciation grew. And it's like the original coming of age tale, and he set a lot of precedents, and I see so much influence in stories like Harry Potter and just modern day coming of age tales from childhood. So I really enjoyed it, and it's probably one of my favorite classics now. So David. I really just loved his character development, and all of the side characters were so memorable and vivid and relatable and just very human. And even though I have some issues with the representation of women in this novel, and I just wrote a 10-page paper on it, I do still feel like Dickens does some very interesting things with both female and male characters and just kind of their interpersonal relationships. And I loved how flawed David was. And I also really enjoyed this because there are a lot of autobiographical aspects, which I won't go into, but if you get this edition, they talk about it a lot. And also just, again, going back to David's development, his faults were really explored and kind of delved into. And I loved seeing people having consequences for their actions and their decisions, because that's the way life works, and David definitely had to grapple with that. And by the end I was crying. I was so attached, and I cried throughout because it was sad. But I don't know, I feel like this book is one I could come back to, and I was really happy that I took a class that had such good discussions around it. So okay, the next book I reread for this class was A Tale of Two Cities. So as I mentioned, I did not enjoy this when I read it, and I've talked about this before many times. When I read this book for fun, I had just read Pride and Prejudice and Jane Eyre, and so I wanted a, 19th century lit, British lit romance again. and this was on a list I saw, like from BuzzFeed or something, and I will never trust another list like that again, because in my opinion, this is not a romance. This is about the French Revolution, and there is romance in it, but I wouldn't even say it's like kind of what makes the story, but it's more about the characters and specifically the men and not Lucy, who's the woman. But I don't know, it's definitely not a romance, and if it was, it's like a tragic romance. I cried again reading this. The end gets me. I definitely like this more. Rated it 4 out of 5 this time. This edition helped immensely because there are so many footnotes and it tells you like what he's referencing, and it just made a lot more sense. The first time I read this, I was like, I have no clue what's going on, and this time I knew what was going on and I could track the story, and the characters again are so vivid and personable and complex, and I really enjoyed this one. I would read it again. Last book I read for this class was The Cider House Rules. Now, this was not by Charles Dickens, which we were all very confused by, but it does have intertextuality and it was influenced greatly by David Copperfield and Great Expectations, which I didn't read for this class, but it's still Dickens. Like all of the red tabs are Dickens references. This book follows Homer Wells, who's an orphan, as he grows up, and it's a coming of age story, and it kind of follows his life and the things that go on at the orphanage. And I do think it's very it was ahead of its time, because there is a great emphasis on the discussion of abortion, and so that discussion was very interesting, especially in today's climate. And it is very graphic especially the first 50%. It was like Grey's Anatomy, surgical like graphicness, and I don't vibe with that at all. That's not my thing, and so it did kind of wig me out. I rated this a 2 out of 5. I really did not enjoy it. Like at the end, it would have been lower, but at the end, there's a chapter called Over Burma, and that chapter and the last chapter were the only interesting parts of the entire story, in my opinion. I just didn't like the writing. None of the characters I thought were likable or redeemable. It did make me cry, but I just really didn't like this book, and I would never read this again unless it was forced upon me. So there is a movie though with Paul Rudd, young Tobey Maguire, and somebody else, I forget their name. Michael Caine, I think, is in it. Anywho, okay. Next class was an African-American lit and history class. It was interdisciplinary, and so I'm an English lit major and I have a history minor, so this was like right up my alley. So I read 5 books for this class. I was struggling this semester with my reading load. And so the first book we read was Beloved by Toni Morrison. It's my first Toni Morrison. It will not be my last. This book follows Setha, who has run away from a plantation, and she has children, and she's dealt with some extreme trauma in her past, and it kind of follows as the ripples from that trauma kind of go outwards from Setha and to her friendships and her family and her children. It was a very interesting book. I would reread it. Very, I think, important discussion around the antebellum South and memory and trauma, and it was beautifully written, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Very glad I read it, and we had very interesting conversations. Next book I read for this class was more of a history book, and that's All That She Carried by Tia Mills. Tia Miles. Why do I keep saying Mills? There's an E. Tia Miles. This book wasn't bad, okay? It was historical. I wouldn't even say historical fiction. It was very interesting to me how she used historical scholarship and archival evidence and kind of speculated and wove a narrative that could have happened, which, as historians do more frequently with limited evidence of the past and history. And so it's kind of up to them to kind of navigate that. And I feel like she did a really good job that side of things. However, I was just not personally invested. There weren't characters. We followed some people, and we followed a lot of different things happening all over the country, particularly the South. And I did learn some things about the state in which I grew up, which I was never taught, and that was very interesting. But there wasn't like an emotional connection. There wasn't anyone for me to feel connected to. And so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I would not reread this, I don't think. I feel like I got everything I needed to out of this. And I don't know. That's just how I felt. I was burnt out by that point in the semester too. So next book I read, I really loved, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and that's Deisha Filial's The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. This is a short story collection, and it follows different women as they navigate sex and motherhood and mother-daughter relationships and love and their relationship with God and religion in general. And it was very interesting. My favorite story of the ones in here was How to Make Love to a Physician, right? Or a physicist. It's physicist. I get the two mixed up. Physicist, yeah. I have an exam on this book in a couple of hours, so also I got to meet Deisha, the author. She signed it. She was very sweet. I loved her. And I feel like, again, this offers some very important and interesting conversations. And it's my first short story collection I've ever read, and it made me want to read more of them. And they were all so individual and memorable, but they were also all connected in themes, and then in some, well, just the reoccurring themes tied them all together, and it was beautiful. Next book I read was Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. Again, another classic. This follows Janie as she navigates 3 very distinct marriages to 3 very different men, and each man kind of represents something different. And it's also very centralized in Florida and the Everglades and its role in kind of Southern history. It was very interesting. Gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. Again, kind of like Beloved, it offers very important conversations about African American history and the Black community in the United States. And we talked in my class a lot about history because this book was forgotten for a long time until Alice Walker, The Color Purple, kind of brought it back into the limelight. And so we talked a lot about why it was forgotten and how stories are forgotten and how this employs folklore aspects and just explores a different region that is often kind of not associated with African American history as a southern state, as other southern states are. And so it's really good. I understand why it's a classic. The writing was beautiful. It was a good read, and it's short. Like, you could read this in an afternoon, so you should go do that. The final book I read for this semester was Native Guard by Natasha Trethewey. This is a poetry collection, and it follows her life as she explores or reconciles her mother's death and relationship with domestic violence, and then she kind of goes back in time and discusses African American history in the Civil War and kind of a lot of forgotten history, because she is a scholar on top of a poet. And then she kind of goes back and talks about her role as a Southern writer. And it was very interesting. I'm not a poetry person, but I really enjoyed all of them, and our discussions were very interesting. And I think she does a really great job of like form and using form to manipulate the meaning of the poem and kind of reflect the meaning of the book and the poems. So it got a 4.5 out of 5. I personally am not a poetry person, but it's obviously very good. It won a Pulitzer, and she has been the poet laureate a couple of times now. So it was really good. And again, the discussions around history and the role of literature and art and history was very interesting to me. So those were the 9 books I read. Well, not all of them, but first class this semester. I'll probably do these throughout my time as an English major, because I think it'd be interesting to just see like the progression of how it goes. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe, maybe, possibly. Peace out. Goodbye. In the video.